And we will be beginning tonight in chapter 26. It is my hope that we will finish, in fact, it's not my hope, it's going to happen one way or the other. We're going to finish the book of Job the last Wednesday night in January. And I believe Ron is going to begin a class on angels and heavenly beings or something of that nature in the first Wednesday night in February. And don't hold me to that, but I believe that is what has been decided. But at any rate, we're going to finish Job by the end of January. But to do that, we're going to have to get about 3 or 4 chapters a week, and I think that's doable. Chapters 26 through 31 are a complete unit. It is the final speech of Job to his 3 friends as they have this conversation, this back and forth with one another as they discuss Job's situation. He's lost his health. He's lost his family. He's lost all of his worldly goods. He's lost his influence. He's lost his friendships. He's pretty much lost everything in his life, and he doesn't understand why. And his friends believe that they do understand, and they are trying to help him to understand that this is the reason why you have lost all of these things. And they attribute it to his sin, that he is a sinner. He will not admit his sin, and because he will not admit his sin, that God continues to hold him into account and continues to afflict his life. In chapter 25, where we ended our last study, Bildad, his third friend, or actually the second of the friends that talks, but the final one to give a third speech, gave a very short speech in which he talks about the power of God, about how God is almighty, his power is limitless, and he goes through some of the same kinds of things that have already been mentioned by his other 2 friends a number of times, and so there's nothing in that chapter 25 speech that is original. There is nothing that Job believes that it is going to help him to understand why it is that he is going through all of the difficulty that he's going through, when the assumption is that God has brought this upon him, and yet God does not bring any kind of thing like this, any kind of adversity to the life of the righteous. And so he talks about God's might, God's limits, which are none, and that no man really can stand truly pure and innocent before God, that in comparison to God, man is but a maggot and a worm. And we see as Job begins chapter 26, and his answer to Bildad is that is no help whatsoever. For you just to go through that same speech about how great God is, how mighty he is, that doesn't answer the problems that I have asked. You are answering questions really that nobody is asking. And so verses 1 through 4, he asks, how have you helped him who is without power? How have you saved the arm that has no strength? How have you counseled one who has no wisdom? How have you declared sound advice to many? To whom have you uttered words, and whose spirit came from you? Who do you think you're talking to, I think, is the question that Job asks. Now, as we get later on into the second half of this 6th chapter answer to these men, Job is going to talk about the wisdom that he was honored for, before all of this affliction came upon him, that he was recognized as one of the great wise men of the East. And yet here, these men are speaking to him in such simplified terms and trying to answer the question of his misery with such simplified answers. And I think that what he says there in the first 4 verses of chapter 26 hits at that. Who do you think you're making these arguments to? Do you think that I have no concept of the might of God? That this is some kind of new information to me? That if I just say, oh, okay, God's almighty and God's, powerful and wise and all of this, that all of a sudden that'll just open the floodgate of answers to the problems that I am having? And so he sees that as foolishness, and he's really berating really all 3 men, but especially Bildad. He is berating here in these 4 verses. And then as we look at verses 5 through 14 of chapter 26, Job gives his very eloquent speech on God's power and glory. Does Bildad, is he the only one that has this power? Does Bildad think that Job can't stand toe-to-toe with him on a description of God's power and glory? And so really verses 5 through 14 is a me also to Bildad. You're not the only one who understands and who appreciates and who is awed by the power and the glory of God. It says in verse 5, the dead tremble, those under the waters and those inhabiting them. Sheol is naked before him, and destruction has no covering. He stretches out the north over empty space. He hangs the earth on nothing. He binds up the water in thick clouds, yet the clouds are not broken under it. He covers the face of his throne and spreads his cloud over it. He drew a circular horizon on the face of the waters, at the boundary of light and darkness. The pillars of heaven tremble and are astonished at his rebuke. He stirs up the sea with his power, and with his understanding he breaks up the storm. By his spirit he adorned the heavens. His hand pierced the fleeing serpent. Indeed, these are the mere edges of his ways, and how small a whisper we hear of him. But the thunder of his power, who can understand? Okay, so he mentions 3 things here in verses 5 through 12 about God's glory and his power. And the first thing he mentions in verses 5 and 6 is God's power over the realm of the unseen, the realm of the dead who are below. He understands that God is not just the God of the living, but he is the God of the dead as well. His power extends beyond just this earthly life into the life that is to come. And so God sees, we can't see when a person is buried, they are no longer people who we can see, but God sees them and God knows them and God rules over them. In verses 7 through 11 and verse 13, he is the God over the heavens that are above. In verse 12, he is over the earth itself. The Bible isn't a science book, but the Bible is scientifically accurate. And so when Job describes things here that a lot of people in his day would not have believed, in fact, probably the majority of the world would not have believed. We read these things, and because our knowledge of these scientific things is more extensive, we just kind of read over it and go, yeah, that's right. This would have been new information for a lot of people. The reason Job knew it is not because Job had the same telescopes and abilities to travel as we do. The reason Job knew these things is because God had revealed these things. For instance, last part of verse 7, He hangs the earth on nothing. It could very well be that that was the vast minority view in His day and time. You ever looked at some of the theories that throughout history of how this earth is existing as it exists? What is supporting this earth? Seems like the most typical one is it's on the back of a turtle, a giant turtle. There's also some theory that it's on the back of an elephant, and other things just as amazing as that. And we look at that and we go, well, that's just the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Well, because of what we know, because of what we have discovered a long time ago about this earth. But I tell you, if all you had known in your life was just the small amount of area that you live in, those who've lived in the Allen area all of your life, if that's all you knew about the existence of this earth, you would be ripe for swallowing the idea that this earth is planted on the back of a big turtle, or some kind of fish, some kind of cosmic fish, or something of that nature. And so while it may sound just terribly ridiculous to us, in the history of the world, that has not been that ridiculous of an idea. And so when He says He hangs the earth on nothing, we look at that and we go, yeah, of course. But it could very well be that a lot of people in Job's day would have gone, well, that's a new idea, that this thing is just suspended out there on nothing. And how in the world could it suspend on nothing? It might make more sense if you didn't understand, this how this universe works. It might make more sense to think that it's perched on something, a turtle. That might make more sense. And it's just up there on nothing. And the other things that amaze him, verse 8, the weight of a cloud. How in the world does a cloud stay up in the air? Tons and tons and tons of water in a cloud. Job knew that. He knew how much a cloud weighed. He knew that thing stayed up there too. And so all of these things, the circular horizon on the face of the waters, all those things, scientifically accurate. And there's really no way that Job would have known for absolute certain about all of these things, except that he knew the God who had revealed these things. And you want some good ammo? Talk to your neighbors who don't believe that the Bible is inspired. This is some of that here in these verses. How did Job know? If this is not inspired, how did Job get it right? And so we have God's dominion over all of these things. Verse 12, He stirs up the sea by His power, breaks up, by His understanding, He breaks up the storm. Whether it is below the earth or the things above the cosmic world above us, or it is the things of the earth itself. How do they exist, and how are they maintained? And Job's answer to that is, it is by God. I was a teenager in a class. Well, actually, I was a little older than a teenager. I was married at the time. So I was probably 22, 24 years old. And a good friend of mine was the preacher there where I was. He was a generation above me, but he and I were very close. And he asked a question one time, why is there a rainbow? How does a rainbow exist? And I spoke up in class, and I said, God made it. Well, that wasn't the answer he wanted. The answer he wanted was all the however a rainbow, the scientific answer is what he wanted. But the answer, there is a scientific answer, but there's also a spiritual answer. And the spiritual answer is the rainbow exists because God determined that it would exist. The same reason everything else in this world exists, and it works the way that it works. And Psalm chapter 19 tells us that this world is shouting that there is a God. Romans chapter 1 tells us that if we look up into the sky, if we look at this creation and we don't see God, we are fools. And to that, Job would say amen. Job considers the realm of the dead. He considers the heavens. He considers the earth. And he says, if you can't see God in that, then you just can't see. And he adds there in verse, I love the way he puts this in verse 14, and these are the mere edges of his ways. How small a whisper we hear of him. The thunder of his power, who can understand? What he's saying is, you look at this earth, you look under this earth, you look above this earth into the heavens, and you see this power and this wisdom. He says, all we're seeing is the tip of the iceberg. Seeing those images of icebergs, just a little bit of iceberg sticking out, and then below it, it's thousands and thousands and thousands of times bigger. He said, that's our view of God. We see the power and the glory of God and what He's made. He said, that's not even the hem of the garment of the power and the glory of the God who made us and who we serve. So we can, in a certain sense, appreciate His power and His glory through the things that He has made. But in another sense, we can't even begin to understand, even when we look at all of these things, how truly powerful and how truly glorious God is. And so Job's answer to Bildad is a hearty amen. Not answering his questions, not giving him an answer to why he is suffering like he is. But Bildad has nothing on Job as far as an appreciation for the glory and the power of God. And so that's chapter 26. He kind of builds off of that in chapter 27 with a warning that he has already given, but now he really expresses it deeply. A warning against his three friends, being God's power and God's glory, God's majesty, being cognizant of that. We sure better be awfully careful how we deal with God and how we deal with those who are the people of God. And I think what he says in chapter 27 is, you guys, if what I am saying about myself is true, you guys are on the verge of receiving the wrath of God yourselves. Chapter 27, verse 1, moreover, Job continued his discourse and said, let me get here. As God lives, who has taken away my justice, and the Almighty who has made my soul bitter. As long as my breath is in me and the breath of God in my nostrils, my lips will not speak wickedness, nor my tongue utter deceit. Far be it from me that I should say you are right. Till I die, I will not put away my integrity from me. My righteousness I hold fast. It will not let it go. My heart will not reproach me as long as I live. So Job starts out this section of his speech with two vows. And the first of those vows, and I think what he says here about what he is determined to do and to not do, and then what he says beginning in verse 7 about the wicked, I think what Job expects is for these men to learn a lesson from that. It's kind of like when Job's friends were talking about him and saying, now we know what happens to the wicked. What they're saying is, we know why this has happened to you, Job. And so they use this general term of the wicked, what always happens to the wicked, intending to say, Job, what happens to the wicked? Well, they lose their children. What they're saying is, Job, the reason you lost your children is because you're a wicked man. Well, they lose their wealth. Well, the reason you've lost your wealth, Job, is because you're a wicked man. And Job kind of turns that on them then in this chapter. And what it kind of says is, you keep talking like you're talking. You keep saying the things about me that are not true that you are saying. And I'm not going to be the only one who loses his children and his home and his fortune and his health. Because what you're speaking is wickedness and hypocrisy. The things that you have accused me of, that's what you are doing. So the first thing he vows is that he's not going to utter anything that God would judge as wicked or deceitful. He says, what you guys have spoken, God is hearing. And what you have spoken is wickedness. When you have accused me of things that you have no idea that I did, and yet you're accusing me of those things, so that's wickedness. And things that you have said about me and the things that have come upon me, that's hypocrisy speaking. Because what you're saying is that you're a better person than I am, and that's evidenced by the fact that we're not going through the things that you're going through. So he says, I've determined I'm not going to do that. When he says he determines not to do it, what he's really saying is, you've done it. He says, I'm never going to surrender my belief in my integrity and in my righteousness. These guys can keep talking and they can go through round 4 and round 5 and round 6 and round infinity. If they can talk here until they all lose their voices. He says, I'm not going to quit saying that I am a righteous man. And he's not going to quit affirming his integrity. Job knows who Job is a whole lot better than these men know who Job is. And again, we want to emphasize, Job is not accusing God of doing something wrong. What Job is saying is, I am innocent. I have my integrity. I am righteous. And because of that, I don't understand why God is working like God is working. To say we don't understand God is not to say that we don't believe God, or we don't believe in the goodness and the righteousness and the power of God. It's just saying that we realize that God does things the way God does things, and they're above our ability to understand. And so beginning then in verse 7, he talks about the enemies. and the wicked. He says, may my enemy, and I think his enemy, the enemy he's talking about here, is these men. You know, with friends like this, who needs enemies? I think that's kind of his point to them. Man, the way you guys are talking and things you're accusing me of, you're not acting like friends. You're acting like enemies. May my enemy be like the wicked, and he who rises up against me like the unrighteous. For what is the hope of the hypocrite? Though he may gain much, if God takes away his life, will God hear his cry when trouble comes upon him? Will he delight himself in the Almighty? Will he always call on God? What does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and he loses his own soul? That's the question that Job is asking these men. They're making the arguments that they're making because they want to win an argument. And Job's question is, what does it benefit you? If you win an argument, what good does it do you if you lose your soul doing it? And I tell you, I've heard arguments made where people had good points, but they made their arguments in such a way. I've seen preachers do this. They made their arguments in such a way that even though they were right biblically, as far as truth is concerned, they're wrong in their attitudes. What good is it to have the truth if you misuse it? That's what these men have done. They've taken, there's hardly anything that they have said that its very foundation isn't true. Is God righteous? Yes. Is God powerful? Yes. Does God punish the wicked? Yes. Does God reward the good? Yes. It's all true. But they have taken those truths and they have so misapplied them. Job said, what you have done is you have practiced wickedness against me and hypocrisy against me. And if you think God is happy with what you have done and what you have said, you have another think coming. In verses 11 through 23 of chapter 26, Job says, I will teach you about the hand of God. What is with the Almighty I will not conceal. Surely all of you have seen it. Why then do you behave with complete nonsense? He says, what you have said, he calls it complete nonsense. It's ridiculous. The things that you have said, and how dare you say these things? These, as nonsensical as they are, how dare you make these points, knowing the power and the righteousness of God. And so he begins to talk about the wicked, the portion of the wicked. And there's really nothing really new in all of this. Verse 14, interesting, his children are multiplied, it is for the sword, his offspring shall not be satisfied with bread. Now in I think it was chapter 24, he talks about that good things happen to bad people and bad things happen to good people as well. It's not as easily divided to say, well, all bad things happen to bad people, all good things happen to good people. He says the truth is in the middle of that. But I think what he does in verses 13 through 23 is he says, there is a general principle at play here. While good things do happen to bad people, and we see it all around us, and we wonder, about how good really sometimes wicked people have it, why these good things happen for them. I think the general rule that he is presenting in verses 13 through 23 is it's a whole lot better, a whole lot more sure. It's talking about just actual physical things, life on earth. The general rule is it's going to be better to be righteous than it is to be wicked. As a general rule, verses 14 and 15, children suffer. Children become collateral damage of wickedness. There is a difference between what Ezekiel says about children not inheriting the guilt of their fathers and what Job says here about children can become collateral damage because of the wickedness of their fathers. And so, yes, he has children, he says, but they become opportunities for swords to slaughter. Verses 16 through 18, his home, his valuables are fragile and vulnerable. And he says that, I like what he says in verse 17, he may pile it up. He may have all of these things, clothing, gold, silver, all of this kind of stuff. He may pile up. He says, but the just will wear it, and the innocent will divide the silver. Solomon in Ecclesiastes makes these kind of points, that men, he doesn't say it about the wicked necessarily, but about all men, that there's a vanity of life that says that all the things that you gain in life, you work your fingers to the bone, and then you die, and some idiot gets to enjoy all the things that you work so hard to build up. And that's kind of Job's point. Not the idiot does it, but that the just get to do that with the prosperity of the wicked. Not always, but typically. The unrighteous man, the wicked man, does not get to fully enjoy all the things that he has built up for himself. And in verses 19 through 23, the wicked is destined to be terrorized, to be swept away, and to be scorned. There is no bright future for the wicked. If we can't say that about this life, we can certainly say it about the wicked's future in the life that is to come. And so Job's message in verse 27 is tread lightly on the things of God. Take your shoes off, as the angel would tell Moses, because you're on holy ground. Anytime you start talking about God and the justice of God and how God does the things that God does, you better be careful. Because if you're not, there is a great chance that you will say something that God considers wicked, and then you will experience the power and the glory of God in the negative sense as he comes against you. And then chapter 28 is one of my favorite chapters in the book of Job. He talks about wisdom. Catch up here. The surpassing value of wisdom. In verses 1 through 4, he talks about the mining process, mining for ore. He says, surely there is a mine for silver, and a place where gold is refined. Iron is taken from the earth, and copper is smelted from ore. Man puts an end to darkness and searches every recess for ore in the darkness and the shadow of death. He breaks open a shaft from people in places forgotten by feet. They hang far away from men. They swing to and fro. He is describing the mining process here. Sure sounds like that they had some pretty sophisticated mining processes, probably before the flood and definitely after the flood. What he is describing here is essentially, I know that they didn't have the technology that we have now, but getting ore out of the ground is, except for the technology about it, it's the same process since the time when men discovered that there was gold and silver underneath the ground and they wanted to get it out. And that is, you have to dig a hole and you have to go into the darkness, and you have to pull it out. And so he describes that here. You go in, you search all of the recesses in this mine shaft that you have made, and you look in this darkness for the precious metals that are there. And he says in verses 5 through 11 that collecting these precious metals becomes a relentless pursuit despite the grave dangers that are involved in it. He talks about man overturning mountains. He cuts channels in the rocks. He dams the rivers. All of these great efforts, and a lot of it extremely dangerous. You ever been in a coal mine? I haven't been and don't want to be. I don't want to be in a gold mine either, or a silver mine. I don't want to go under the earth. And the reason for that is I've heard the stories, and I've seen the documentaries and the movies, and it is dangerous work. Imagine if it's dangerous work now, what it would have been in that day and time. How dangerous it would have been to go down a shaft into the earth and pluck these things out. He talks about it in verse 7. When they go down into that shaft, they're going in a path that no bird knows, nor has the falcon's eye seen it. The proud lions have not trodden it, nor has the fierce lion passed over it. He puts the hand on the flint. He overturns the mountains at the roots. He cuts out channels in the rocks. His eye sees every precious thing. He dams up the streams from trickling. What is hidden, he brings forth to light. So he goes into dark places, whether it is in the strip mining process. I think that's what he's describing in overturning the mountains at the roots. You know, you strip the mountain away, or cuts out channels in the rocks. That's describing the building shafts into the ground to gain, whatever's down there that you want to find, and then damming the rivers. Why? So that you can find at the bottom of the river what is there, the gold and things that might be on the river bed. And so he says, what do? You go places that no other being would ever want to go, would ever think about going. Why is that? Because there is something down there that is precious to you that is not precious to those other things. The bird doesn't appreciate it. You put a bunch of gold dust in front of a bird, and then you put a bunch of bird seed in front of him. What's the bird going to go for? The bird seed. What's the man going to go for? Gold, because he understands the value of it. It is a valuable thing to him. And so he's describing here, man goes through all these processes that no animal would ever even think about going through. He leaves the land of the living to go down into the earth, to the place really of death, in order to gain these things. And it is, I've said it before, it is a shame. The lengths that men will go to get wealth. At the end of the day, what does a man gain? If he gains the whole world, but he loses his own soul. And that's verses 13 through 28. Here, man, he goes through this expensive, time laborious, dangerous effort to get all this stuff out of the ground. And what Job wishes is that men would take just a portion of that kind of effort to mine God for wisdom. Man does not know its value. Well, verse 12, where can wisdom be found? And where is the place of understanding? Man does not know its value, nor is it found in the land of the living. The deep says, it is not in me, and the sea says, it is not within me. Where you're not going to find wisdom. You're not going to dig a shaft into the ground, climb down in there, and at 100 feet down below the surface of the earth, you're not going to discover wisdom. God didn't put the wisdom down there for you to dig a shaft and find it. It cannot be purchased for gold, nor can silver be weighed for its price. It cannot be valued in the gold of Ophir, in precious onyx or sapphire. Neither gold nor crystal can equal it, nor can it be exchanged for jewelry of fine gold. No mention shall be made of coral or quartz, for the price of wisdom is above rubies. The topaz of Ethiopia cannot equal it, nor can it be valued of pure gold. Here's what Job sees. He sees how pitiful it is that men will go to such great lengths, such great dangers to gain what they won't walk across the street to get that's even more valuable. Is wisdom more easily attained than gold and silver? Solomon said in Proverbs that wisdom's out in the street shouting, and all we have to do is go out there and listen to it. God has made wisdom abundantly available so that you don't have to overturn a mountain. You don't have to dig a hole in the ground. You don't have to dam up a river in order to get it. All you have to do is desire it. And when you desire it, God has made sure that it will be easily available. He talks at the end of chapter 28 about God, when God established wisdom. When did he do that? At creation. Well, for us. Yeah, for us. He declared wisdom when he made this world. The other passages talk about that. Yes, other passages do talk about the wisdom that is seen in this creation. God declared wisdom when he made this world. He showed it to mankind. And what is that wisdom? What's the very heart of that wisdom, verse 28? Fear God. Behold, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom. You see that over and over and over. You see it in the book of Proverbs. You see it in those last couple of verses of Ecclesiastes over and over and over again. You want to be wise. It begins with fearing God. And if you fear God and seek his wisdom, God's promise is you will find it. You may never find silver and gold. You may never find onyx and all of these topaz and all of that. You may dig all of your life and not find those things. But you give your heart to God. You fear him, and you'll find that wisdom that you need that will make you far richer than any gold and silver can make you. And that is chapters 26 through 28. We will conclude this speech and look at chapters 29, 30, and 31 in our study next week. Thanks for being here this evening. If you would